Hello and welcome to Service Nerd. In this video, we're going to answer the question, what is a business rule in ServiceNow? Welcome back. So today we're going to answer the question, what is a business rule in ServiceNow? And to do that, we're going to answer some other questions as well. But before I get too far into it, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone that's subscribed so far. We've recently hit 1,500 subscribers, which is, way beyond whatever I thought possible. So really much appreciated. Thanks a lot. If you haven't yet subscribed, please consider doing so. Hit the like button, smash the bell icon so you get notified whenever I upload new videos just like this one. So let's get into it. So on this video, we're going to look at what a business rule is. We're going to look at why we use them. What are the different types of business rules? How are they processed? What do we use them for? Do we have access to classes? Can we access classes? What are those classes? And are there any alternatives to business rules? If you know anyone, any alternatives right now, drop them in the comments. Let's see if you're right. And then we're going to have a sneaky look at the form. So what is a business rule? So it's a server-side script that we can apply to a table. And they run when a record is inserted, updated, deleted, or queried. Okay, and those are our different options. They apply consistent, and this is really key actually. They apply consistently to records when accessed through forms, lists, or web services. And that's something that sets them apart from client scripts, for example. Client scripts will work on the browser. Business rules do not. Business rules just work, and they work on the server, as I've already mentioned. But they'll work for things like web services, and that's key. Client scripts, clues in the name. Web service, you're not going to touch the client. It's not going to work. Okay. Business rule, yes, it does. Okay. So that's fundamentally what a business rule is. And why do we use them? Why do we use business rules? Why bother? Well, they're quick. They're a lot quicker than client-side scripting, client scripts. Not reliant on the client browser. I've just mentioned that before. And we can perform complex database queries on these. So business rule, we can go off and run queries on different tables. So for example, if we create a business rule on the incident table, we can shoot off to the problem records and start querying to see, is there any other incidents of this nature that are related to that problem? We can do things like that. Okay. So what is a business rule? So it's a server-side script that we can apply to a table. And they run when a record is inserted, updated, deleted, or queried. Okay, and those are our different options. They apply consistent, and this is really key actually. They apply consistently to records when accessed through forms, lists, or web services. And that's something that sets them apart from client scripts, for example. Client scripts will work on the browser. Business rules do not. Business rules just work, and they work on the server, as I've already mentioned. But they'll work for things like web services, and that's key. Client scripts, clues in the name. Web service, you're not going to touch the client. It's not going to work. Okay. Business rule, yes, it does. Okay. So that's fundamentally what a business rule is. And why do we use them? Why do we use business rules? Why bother? Well, they're quick. They're a lot quicker than client-side scripting, client scripts. Not reliant on the client browser. I've just mentioned that before. And we can perform complex database queries on these. So business rule, we can go off and run queries on different tables. So for example, if we create a business rule on the incident table, we can shoot off to the problem records and start querying to see, is there any other incidents of this nature that are related to that problem? We can do things like that. Okay. Now we're starting to get into the meat of it, really. So what are the different types of business rule? Okay. And this, I'll give you a clue. This may or may not be an sysadmin question on the exam. At least, anyway, I've seen it there. So we've got a before business rule, an after business rule, an async business rule. What's that? And a display business rule. So let's just step through them and we can understand what each one of those are. So before business rule is after the user submits the form, but before any action is taken on the record in the database. So, for example, if you're clicking a save or submit on an instant record, the before business rule will run when you hit save, but before it's committed. That's saved to the database. After this is after the user submits the form and after any action is taken on the database. Okay, so you've got before and after. Before, think about it, if you run a query, it's going to run that query before it commits to the database. After it's committed to the database, then you can go and run a query on the business rule. That's fine. Async, what's that? Well, the system creates a scheduled job from the business rule after the user submits the form and after any action is taken on the record in the database. So it's kind of similar to after business rule. It runs after the commit, but it's kind of it sits in the queue and waits to be picked up and then acted upon. Okay, rather than immediately after the same. Display business rule. So this is before the rule, before the form, is presented to the user. So just after the data is read from the database. So think about it like this. So if you're opening an incident form, you're a user, you've clicked on the number of the incident form and it's loading onto your screen. Well, that's when a display business rule will run. So now we've looked at the different types of business rules. How are those types processed? In what order are they processed? And more importantly, why do we care? Why is it not enough just to know what the different types are? I mean, I've answered my exam question. I know what the types are. Why do we care? Well, we care because a lot of the information we've got on community, the stuff I put out there on videos are not, and this is why I love ServiceNow. There is no hard and fast rule to do everything. Of course, you can watch these tutorials and go, all right, that's the way to do it. But the beauty is there are best practices. But the beauty is you form a broad understanding of how things work, how they're processed, in what order they're processed, and then you make that decision yourself. You can use all that bits of information as tools in your armory to come up with the best solution. And again, one of the beautiful things I love about ServiceNow is there's multiple ways to achieve the same result sometimes. Okay, so why do we care how they're processed? We care because it allows us that information to then make decisions on what the best solution is for our clients. Okay, so let's have a look. So consider this scenario. A user or system makes a query to the database. Let's think about incident again. You make a query. So you might, for example, say, show me all the incidents that are a state new. That's a query. The query business rules will run. Okay. It then does your database query look on the right-hand side. When you've done that, you may open one. So let's say you open a new incident. That's your display business rule. Okay. You then do some bits on the incident. You perhaps change the short description. You click save. That's going for a form submit. It runs your before business rule, updates the database, and then runs your after business rules. Okay. Anyone that was paying attention on the last slide, you will notice there is one missing, and that's the async rule, because that isn't really dependent on this, but will run afterwards. Okay. It'll sit in our scheduled job in our queue and get picked up and then run. So knowing this, and knowing we've got a query displayed before and after, allows us to decide what is the best type of business rule to create for our end client for the situation in hand. Okay. So now we know the different types and we know how they're processed. What do we use business rules for? Okay. And can we start to see what type of business rule we might create for these different scenarios? So this isn't exclusive, but let's go through them. So we can use a business rule to change values in a form fields or a record. Yeah. So we can use it so field values can be set to specific values available for that field, copied from other fields, relative values determined by a user's role, right? So we can put conditions based on someone's role. We've got a condition field in business rule. We can use them to trigger events for email notifications. So we've got an event queue. We can, based on a certain condition, we can fire an event and which sends a notification. We can display messages at the top of the form to say, hey, you've done something wrong or you've done something right, maybe. Start thinking Are these before business rules or after business rules? And that's how we should be thinking about this in our head. Change values on child or parent tasks. So we might want to do that. So if you update the short description on an incident, do we want to update the short description on the child tasks? And what type of business rule would that be? We can prevent users from accessing or modifying certain fields on a form. So again, a bit of security there we've got. We can abort current action or database transaction. So we can have a business rule under certain conditions that when you try and do something, perhaps it aborts it. Yeah, so we can do that. And there are lots and lots more. Again, drop some notes in the comments below, any other scenarios you can think of, or even just think about them and think of what you've seen in the instance. There are well over 1,500 different business rules in the instance to go and have a look and see what they do. Okay, and what objects do we have access to in a business rule? So in my previous video, again, I'll put one of those annoying banners up around client scripts. We've got different objects in client-side scripting as we have in server-side scripting. And please do not confuse the two. They are separate things. You've got different objects that you can access from either client or server side. Okay, so we need to get our head around that. So in ServiceNow world, we have access to these objects. So we've got current and previous. Quite often in business rules, you'll see those as declared parameters kind of passed into the function. Current record, previous record. Okay. And these are objects, but think of them, again, if we simplify it, because I'm all about simplifying, my brain's not that complex. Think about it in terms of the record itself. So we've opened up an incident. We're running our business rule. That incident at that moment in time is current. If I've changed anything, so let's say I changed the state, I've changed it from the previous. Okay, so current and previous. We've also got access to Glide Server, so GS. Again, there's multiple different methods that you can use. I'm giving you an example. You might have seen gs.now, which is the current date and time. We've got access to G Scratchpad. So this is really useful. And this is where it all starts coming into play. And it allows you to start thinking of solutions, knowing different bits of information now, whereas before you might have been constrained to doing one way because you only knew one way. Waffle. But with the G Scratchpad, what you can do is on a display business rule. So when the form loads, you can do things such as set a variable with a property. Okay. So you can get a property from the system properties table. You can set it into the G Scratchpad and then pick that up from the client. So from a client script, you can access the Scratchpad, which you've set on a display business rule. Okay. That starts becoming very powerful and can get you out of a few scrapes. And that's just one example. Okay. And there are more objects as well. I mean, of course, we can create our own objects, var object and put a load of properties in there if we wanted to. We can query different records. So we can query, I said problem records before, problem records, create objects out of those problem records and pass them back in. So there's lots more. But if we just think about current, previous, G Scratchpad and GS, those are the standard objects. And they may or may not be a question I've seen on the admin cert. Okay. And then we come on to this. What are the alternatives? So we've talked a bit about business rules. Hopefully we've given a quick overview of what business rules are. Are there alternatives? Should we be using business rules? Well, I think business rules, there's a lot of them in the system. I think I said 1,500 before. So they're not going to go away overnight. Okay. But you may or may not have heard of Flow or Flow Designer. And I say that tongue in cheek because I've got a few Flow Designer videos and it's quite widely known. I'm a big fan of Flow Designer. And that's the service now driving towards more low code solutions for people that don't necessarily know how to script. And I should mention really that business rules aren't all about scripting. You can take kind of, click and point actions. You don't have to know scripting for business rules, but it helps. But Flow Designer is a worthy, I'm not going to say opponent, a worthy replacement in some instances for business rules. And I think now what we should be doing is when we come to a story or a solution for a client, we should be thinking to ourselves, the first thing we should think is, can we do this in a Flow or Flow Designer? And Flow Designer still has its quirks at the minute. It does, and I think it's maybe 2 versions away from being absolutely brilliant. But and I do love it, by the way. But we need to think. We need to start thinking that can we do this in a flow? How do we do this in a flow? Okay. So I know we've mentioned all about business rules, but I think the first port of call could potentially be business rules, and I'm happy to have that discussion. I've realised that is a contentious conversation. And I'm expecting floods of comments. No, I love business rules. I do too, by the way. I can write business rules a lot faster than I can Flow, but I do like Flow Designer. Okay, drop your comments in below, and we can have a discussion about it. Yeah, be happy to hear what you say on that one. And we've also got workflows. Maybe so. These are the kind of legacy workflows. I understand they don't teach in the admin courses anymore, but we could run workflows if we really wanted to. Okay, that's an alternative. And there are more as well. I mean, you could argue, yes, we can launch off to a script include and do it in there. There's different solutions. So again, drop them in the comments below if you've got any. I'm sure people will find them useful. Okay, so hopefully we've given a quick overview of what a business rule is. I think it's about time now we delve into the tool and we'll start having a look at the form and start playing with some of the fields and having an explore around. So let's do that. So let's take a look at the business rule form itself, okay, and explore that a bit more. So I've gone into the system and I've picked a business rule that already exists rather than looking at a form with nothing on it. I thought I'd show you some context. So if we look at this form straight away, we can see it has a name. We have a table that we can apply this to. The logic's going to apply it to. In this case, it's incident. And we have when to run. So under what conditions is this business rule going to run? So this in particular one is going to run when additional comments change, when the state is on hold, the on hold reason is awaiting caller, and the caller is me. So this is going to change us. This is so additional comments coming back into the incident is going to move it to in progress. The clue's in the name. So we've got whether we run it on insert or update, and we've got some actions that we can perform. So if you remember, I said that we could use business rule scripts in business rule, or we could use configuration drop downs, for example, low code. These actions will take effect based on the when to run. But what if we actually want to do some scripting? Well, we can see more details because anyone that's kind of keen-eyed and was actually listening before throughout my waffle will notice we've got insert and update. But what about the rest? So if we go top right here, we've got active, got clues in the name, but we've got advanced, right? So we can click advanced, which gives us more options. So now we start seeing whether we want to run this on insert, on update, delete, or query. We've seen those before. And in when, we've got our options again. Before, after, async, display. Again, I'm not saying anything, but then this may or may not be in admin exams. And then we've got order. So order is the order in which you want this business rule to run. Now, just know that's there. It will default to 100, but the lower number will run first. And that's important to remember because sometimes you can run into issues when you're debugging or you've got sent an incident there to look at where the order is important of when the business rule runs. So as you mature in your ServiceNow kind of journey, you will start to understand and use that more. And then we've got role conditions as well down here. So this will run under certain roles. So we've got actions. In here, we can set the values. So when to run, we've got the conditions. This is what's going to happen when it runs. So we're going to state to in progress. We can add a message if we wanted to, or we could abort the action. So boom, shut, invalid update, it'll say. But when we click advanced, if you look here, we get advanced. We get the option to script. So we can put additional conditions inside the script here. Likewise, we can put in complex database queries in here, which is what I've said before. So if you know what you're doing when it comes to scripting and you need to do complex database queries, you can do it in here as well. Okay. And look, this is pre-populated. ServiceNow do really good job at doing that. Is when you create the business rule, it'll pre-populate it with this function. Okay. And it'll pass in, where have we seen these? current and previous. So those, those are current and previous objects that we've got access to within this script. Okay, so we've taken a quick look at the form. We can run set your conditions there on when it's going to run and the action it's going to take when it does run, which is the actions or the advanced script there. So I hope you found this video useful. It's the third in a series I'm doing around kind of fundamentals in ServiceNow. So if you have liked it, give it a thumbs up, like it, subscribe if you haven't, share with all your ServiceNow, Service Nerd buddies. That'd be much appreciated. Anyway, happy coding or happy low coding, and I'll see you next time.